Hey guys, tonight we're tucking you into a scratchy wool blanket that smells faintly of seaweed and sheep because you've just volunteered. Yes, you, to spend a year in Dark Age Britain, a place whose Yelp page would simply read, "No Wi-Fi, lots of mud, wolves occasionally join the chat." You probably wouldn't survive this without the narrator's calm voice and a reckless sense of curiosity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like picturing all of us scattered across the globe like little lanterns while we time travel together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, once the fan's pretend sea breeze has settled, is the cold. Not the polite, modern cold that lives in the corner of an over-air-conditioned cafe, but the ancient, damp cold that clings like a toddler with a grudge. You're standing on the deck of a squat, tar-sealed boat somewhere in the English Channel, circa the year 500 give or take. Historians are still uncertain about the exact date because nobody can agree when Roman Britain officially coughed its last. And anyway, the captain lost the receipt for the boat. The channel is the color of a bruise, and every wave slaps the hull as though offended by your presence. Somewhere astern, a sailor hums a tune that sounds suspiciously like the intro to a sea shanty tick-tock, except the only audience is a one-eyed gull who keeps auditioning for dinner. Ahead, the shore is a black smudge with one reluctant beacon, a pile of driftwood someone set alight to guide traders in, or perhaps to warn them off. Opinions along the coast differ. That flicker is your first encounter with post-Roman infrastructure, a bonfire maintained by a teenager whose entire job description is keep it lit, try not to fall in. The Romans took their roads, their pay scales, and their heated floors with them when they marched away, leaving behind the linguistic equivalent of new phone, who dis, and a landscape that now answers mostly to local kings whose crowns are basically fancy hats with sharp edges. Your pockets contain a small iron knife, a lump of stale bread, and a Roman coin so worn you could use it as a metaphor for your self-confidence. You've been told by whom? A dream, a podcast, that if you make yourself useful, a village up the estuary will feed you through the winter. Useful is a flexible concept here. You might thatch a roof, recite half-remembered Latin, or simply be tall enough to reach things on high shelves. The economy runs on barter, gossip, and the occasional miracle, so your resume is whatever story you can spin before the porridge burns. The boat grinds onto shingle. The captain announces arrival by belching. You step off. No pier, no passport control, just wet rocks greeting your soft, modern feet. The tide immediately tries to steal your shoes, because the ocean, too, is learning about ownership now that the imperial sheriffs are gone. Torches bob down the beach, locals arriving to see what the surf has delivered. Their dialect is a thick stew of Brythonic and Latin swear words, and when they look at you, they're calculating calories, curiosity, and the possibility that you might be a spy for the next boatload of Saxons. Those famously impatient tourists who have started booking one-way tickets to Kent. A woman with eyebrows like storm clouds offers you a cloak that smells of lanolin and wood smoke. It's heavier than your entire suitcase back home, yet you feel warmer for the weight alone. She doesn't ask your name. Names are currency here, spent only when necessary. Instead, she presses a shell into your palm, spiraled, cream-colored, the kind you once glued to a picture frame in primary school, and says, "Listen." You hold it to your ear and hear, instead of the sea, the echo of departing legions, sandals on stone, dice rattling in bored soldiers' cups, a bureaucrat sighing over unfinished tax rolls. Then she turns, expecting you to follow, because hospitality doubles as surveillance and you are, for the moment, the most interesting stray on the beach. Behind you, the sailor shoves off, already arguing with the gull about the price of fish. Ahead, low hills crouch under low stars, and somewhere in that darkness wolves compose ballads about slow humans. You walk. Each footstep sounds like a question. Will you last the year? Will you remember your real bed? Will you laugh at this night later or shiver forever? The shell in your fist pulses with leftover empire, a reminder that even stone melts, even roads forget. Yet the woman's cloak smells of time and butter, proof that life, annoyingly, keeps simmering regardless of the headlines. At the top of the beach, you glance back. The channel has erased the boat, as history erases mistakes it no longer needs. Ahead, a path barely two-wheel ruts seeded with sheep droppings. Winds toward a glow that might be a hearth, or perhaps just someone carrying coals to a neighbor in a cooking pot, the Dark Age version of Uber Eats. The wind shifts. You catch the scent of porridge, dogs, and something metallic, maybe iron, maybe blood, maybe both. Your stomach growls, a small modern appliance complaining about the menu. You tighten the cloak, feel the knife handle knock against your hip like an overly friendly drunk, and step forward. Britain, such as it is, opens around you like a book whose pages have been used to wrap fish, smudged, pungent, but still trying to tell a story. And so the year begins, not with a bang, not even with a proper door, but with the soft crunch of shingle under borrowed boots and the certainty that tomorrow's cold will be older, and therefore wiser than today's. You walk on, leaving 21st century certainty bobbing in the surf like an empty plastic bottle. Somewhere ahead, a monk is already misremembering this moment. Somewhere behind, the gull has claimed your footprints for the sea. You trudge uphill toward the glow, boots squelching like reluctant accordions, and reach a cluster of huts that seem to have been designed by a committee of damp badgers. The first thing that hits you is the smell, a layered perfume of seaweed, wet dog, wood smoke, and something vaguely cheesy that might be dinner or the dog. A half-dozen figures loom, backlit by a central fire whose smoke hugs the ground like it's searching for lost change. Nobody speaks. They just stare as if you're a delayed delivery from the Romans. Sorry, we already sent that empire back. The eyebrow woman nudges you forward. You manage a smile that feels like a used tea bag and produce your stale bread as an offering. A boy with a haircut that looks chewed rather than chopped snatches it, sniffs, and declares it almost edible. High praise. You're gestured toward a low doorway. Think Hobbit hole after a rough weekend, and you duck inside. The ceiling is a tangle of thatch, spiders, and suspicion. A peat fire smolders in the center. There's no chimney, only a hole that moonlights as a rain inlet. Your eyes water immediately, partly from smoke, partly from the realization that interior design has traveled backwards several centuries without asking your permission. A communal bed, basically a wooden shelf piled with straw and blankets that have given up on color, runs along one wall. A sheepdog already occupies the best spot and raises one eyebrow, clearly questioning your life choices. You sit, straw poking through your leggings like passive-aggressive needles. Outside, someone begins tuning a lyre. Inside, someone else begins snoring. Both are off-key. You learn quickly that personal space is measured in elbows, and you currently possess fewer elbows than everyone else. Commonly known fact, Roman villas had underfloor heating. This hut has underfloor chickens. Obscure tidbit, Archaeologists have found post-Roman beachfront midden heaps containing more limpet shells than any other food waste. Hello, Dark Age seafood diet. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these coastal settlements were seasonal fairs or year-round villages, because the residents left behind equal parts pottery and confusion. A toddler waddles over and gifts you a pebble shaped like a bear if you squint. You accept it like treasure because in an economy of stories, that pebble is your first deposit. The eyebrow woman, whose name you learn phonetically, sounds like Branwen with the loud opinions, hands you a wooden bowl of something steaming. It tastes of the sea smoke and a hint of rebellion. You nod gratitude. She grunts, which here counts as a 5-star Yelp review. Gradually, the hut settles into a chorus of breathing, crackling peat, and the occasional dreamy bleat from a goat you hadn't noticed under the bed. You lie back, feeling the heartbeat of strangers through the straw, and realize you've crossed more than water tonight. You've slipped through a crack in time's floorboards. The fire sighs, the dog farts, and outside the tide keeps trying to rewrite the shoreline, one wave at a time. You close your eyes, not because it's bedtime by any clock you recognize, but because the darkness feels older than exhaustion, and there's literally nothing else to do. Tomorrow, someone will hand you a hoe or a spear or perhaps just a really sturdy spoon and ask you to become useful. Tonight, you're simply the warm body that brought almost edible bread, and that, surprisingly, is enough. You wake to the sound of a roof arguing with itself, thatch creaking like an old librarian who's just caught someone dog-earing a manuscript. Morning light sneaks in through the smoke hole in a thin, defeated column, illuminating dust motes that could be midges, could be metaphors, could be both. The communal bed has migrated in the night. Straw has crept into your boots, your ears, and at least one pocket you were sure was buttoned. You sit up too fast and bang your head on a beam whose only purpose seems to be reminding tall people they're trespassers in the past. Branwen, already vertical, already judgmental, hands you a wooden cup of something that tastes like liquid peat and unsaid apologies. Drink, she orders. The hall waits. You had pictured a grand mead hall straight out of a fantasy trailer. What you get is a long, low barn that smells of damp bark, old smoke, and competitive masculinity. Splintered roof beams slope at angles geometry gave up on centuries ago, and every post is carved with interlaced animals that seem to be giggling at your haircut. Inside, the hearth claims center stage like a drama queen who knows every eye is actually on the fire. There are no windows, just gaps between planks where daylight leaks in sideways, spotlighting swirling smoke like a slow-motion lava lamp made of yesterday's breathing. Benches line the walls. They're basically tree trunks flattened on top by people who believed in approximate furniture. You choose a spot between a man who smells of fermented onions and a child poking a dog with a spoon. Real estate is about compromise. Breakfast is a communal cauldron of porridge stirred with a paddle that looks suspiciously like an oar, suggesting previous employment on a boat or in a very large cereal bowl. Commonly known fact: oats were the Wi-Fi of the early medieval world, ubiquitous, occasionally lumpy, and blamed for everything. Less commonly known, archaeologists in Northamptonshire found a 6th century cauldron with residue of oats, kale, and imported figs. Someone was flexing trade contacts. Historians still argue whether such imported fruit reached ordinary tables or merely sweetened the chief's gloating sessions. The chief, identifiable by the bronze ring on his arm, and the way everyone leans slightly away as if his authority has a gravitational field, stands. He speaks in a dialect that's equal parts weather report and motivational speech. You catch your own name, or at least a sound that might be your name if spoken by someone chewing a rock, paired with the word guest, which could mean anything from honored visitor to emergency protein. You smile, raise your cup, and try to look non-edible. The smoke chooses that moment to stage a coup, billowing sideways into your face. Your eyes stream, your dignity smolders. Somewhere a barred, scruffy, teenage voice breaking like a badly made stool launches into a poem celebrating ancestors who apparently wrestled rivers into submission. Half the audience nods solemnly. The other half mouths the words, suggesting top 40 levels of airplay. A dogfight erupts under the table over what might be a turnip or a desiccated mouse. Hard to tell through the haze. No one intervenes. This is either entertainment or the medieval version of background TV. You sip more peat juice, feel it anchor your stomach to your knees, and decide that surviving the next 12 months will depend less on sword skill than on perfecting the appreciative nod. The chief ends his speech by slamulating. Yes, that's slam plus simulating. A toast, cup slammed on table, splinters flying like cheap confetti. You follow suit, adding a few extra splinters to the collection already nesting in your sleeve. Outside, rain begins, drumming on the roof like impatient script editors. Inside, everyone relaxes. Bad weather means no raids, no fieldwork, no urgent need to be anywhere else. The hall settles into a symphony of chewing, slurping, and the gentle creak of beams remembering forests. You realize you've stopped waiting for something to happen. Happening is already here, fragrant, smoky, and splintery. So you breathe, shallow, because deep invites coughing. Rest your elbows on a tabletop sticky with centuries, and listen to the roof gossip with the rain about the new tall stranger who flinches like a Roman but thanks like a monk. Their verdict: keep him dry, feed him oats, see if he grows useful. When breakfast ends, the hall doesn't empty so much as ooze outside, people pausing at every doorway to discuss the weather in the tone normally reserved for medical diagnoses. You try to follow, but Branwen blocks your exit with the casual authority of a cat claiming a sunbeam. She jerks her chin toward the straw mattress you slept on. Apparently, ownership is negotiable, and today's debate item is blanket real estate. A shepherd, small, fragrant, and wearing a cloak that looks like it still contains active livestock, insists the wool wrap you were given is actually his summer weight, and he wants it back before the next rain squats on the valley. Commonly known fact in many early medieval laws, bedding was listed alongside tools and livestock in compensation fines. You could literally pay a blood price in blankets. Obscure tidbit: a Welsh legal fragment specifies that a guest who soils communal straw must replace it with 3 bundles of rye straw and a new song, suggesting housekeeping doubled as open mic night. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether straw mattresses were rotated seasonally or simply piled higher until the bed achieved geological layers. No consensus, because straw rarely leaves archaeologists flattering notes. You consider your options: surrender the blanket and risk hypothermic diplomacy, or invoke newcomer ignorance and hope for pity. Meanwhile, the shepherd escalates by producing a tally stick carved with notches that look suspiciously like sheep and slash or random woodworm. He points at a notch, points at you, points at the blanket. His argument is clear even without subtitles. The surrounding crowd adopts the settled calm of people who have seen this show before and brought mental popcorn. Thinking fast, you offer the only currency you have left, storytelling. You promise to recount, in nightly installments, the tale of the empire that left the heating on, complete with sound effects if provided a small drum. The shepherd squints, calculating entertainment value against wool insulation. Branwen, sensing compromise, proposes joint custody. The blanket stays on the communal bed. You get one body width tonight, the shepherd gets the rest. And if either party hog rolls, the other may wake them with a ladle of cold water. Applause is not forthcoming, but nods ripple through the onlookers. Dark Age peer review. The shepherd spits on his palm, extends it. You follow suit, wondering how many microbes just declared war. Deal sealed, he immediately flops onto the straw, claims the center, and begins snoring like a small forge. You've lost precious territory, but gained narrative rights, which feels like trading Manhattan for a Magic Beans franchise. Later, you help fluff the mattress, basically stabbing straw with a stick until it looks less like a battlefield and more like a lumpy meadow. Each thrust releases dust that dances in the hearthlight like tiny planets considering collision courses. Somewhere in the mix, you find last year's pea, a bronze pin, and what might be a desiccated beetle wearing a sheep's expression. You pocket the pin. Currency comes in many forms, and jewelry always impresses monks. Branwen, watching your housekeeping efforts, finally cracks a smile, tiny, crooked, gone before it fully arrives, but a smile nonetheless. She mutters a word that could mean acceptable or hopeless but amusing, then wands off to prevent some other diplomatic crisis, perhaps involving spoons. You sit on your newly negotiated sliver of bed, feel straw adjust like a grudging crowd, and realize power here isn't wielded by kings alone. It's tug of war in miniature over fibers, warmth, and the right to snore uninterrupted. Your bottom is already numb, your pride perforated, yet you're weirdly exhilarated. You've survived your first property negotiation without being sued, exiled, or turned into stew. Outside, clouds practice their siege techniques. Inside, the shepherd's snoring syncs with the rain's percussion. You lie back, arrange the blanket's disputed borders like a weary diplomat, and listen to the roof beams gossip about the latest newcomer who thinks blankets are free. Their verdict, amusing, educable, possibly useful if fed regularly. A hand shakes you awake before the sun has even found its slippers, Branwen's, calloused and decisive, as if dawn itself were a door she can kick open. The hearth has shrunk to a sullen glow, so the hall is mostly shadows bargaining for space. You sit up, blanket rights temporarily forgotten, and inhale the official perfume of morning, peat smoke, damp thatch, and the faint but unmistakable scent of porridge beginning its daily conspiracy to stick to something. Commonly known fact, oats were the medieval equivalent of a universal charger. Porridge, bread, beer, even oat milk for fasting days. Obscure tidbit. Archaeologists in Orkney found a 6th century quern stone still dusted with oat residue mixed with field mustard seeds. Someone liked their breakfast with a wasabi kick. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether daily porridge was thin gruel for calories or thick enough to slice. No consensus, because viscosity rarely fossilizes. Branwen thrusts a wooden spoon into your hand, the scepter of kitchen serfdom, and points toward a cauldron the size of a satellite dish if satellites were forged from blackened iron and regret. Your job, stir, scrape, and prevent the oats from bonding with the metal like old college roommates. The fire is coaxed awake with bellows made from cowhide and a goose feather for precision. Apparently, oxygen delivery is an art form. Around you, bodies rise slowly, groaning like whales learning French. The shepherd you blanket wrestled last night gives you a nod that could be peace treaty or mild constipation. He produces a small clay bottle, drips honey into the porridge, payment, you realize, for storytelling rights. The sweet smell blooms, dragging smiles out of even the crankiest warriors, proving morale is just one carbohydrate away. While you stir, Branwen quizzes you on your plans. Plans. You masterfully play for time by asking about local crops. She lists barley, rye, beans, and something called fat hen, which sounds like an insult, but is actually a leafy weed rich in iron, dark age kale, minus the marketing department. You store the info for future small talk with monks who approve of edible flora and disapprove of everything else. A commotion by the door. Two teenagers dragging a fresh log, arguing over whether the tree was lucky or cursed by squirrels. The log wins a spot on the fire, sparks scatter like gossip, and the porridge responds with a volcanic glug that spits goop onto your sleeve. Oat lava, instant bracelet. Laughter ripples. Apparently, scalded newcomers are the morning's entertainment. You laugh too, because employment here is conditional on not being a sore loser or even a sore anything. The chief appears, hair still braided from sleep, looking like someone who negotiates with pillows and wins. He tastes the porridge directly from your spoon, no 5-second rule in play, and grunts approval. Then he drops the day's bombshell. Scouts report smoke columns to the east, possibly Saxon warbands, possibly just charcoal burners with poor social skills. You, newcomer with the tall vantage point, are volunteered to ride along and see what your eyes make of it. Translation: human periscope. Breakfast is dished out, one ladle of porridge, one scoop of existential dread. You eat standing, juggling hot bowl and cool apprehension. The oats coat your tongue like edible wallpaper paste, but the honey rescues the moment, reminding you that sweetness has always been a political act. Keep the porridge happy, keep the people peaceful, keep the storyteller alive long enough to reach episode 2. Outside, the sky blushes peach and pewter. Inside, spoons scrape bowls like rhythm sections tuning up. You rinse your bowl in a bucket of rainwater that doubles as mirror, showing you a reflection whose hair is already adopting local architecture. Branwen claps your shoulder, half at a boy, half you're still on washing up, and says, "Stir faster next time, porridge waits for no one, and neither do Saxons." The hearth crackles, the cauldron burps, and you realize the day's currency has been minted: calories, gossip, and a reconnaissance mission you didn't apply for. You hand back the spoon, now worn smooth by centuries yet to come, and feel the village shift around you like a giant blanket being shaken into shape. Somewhere beyond the palisade, the world coughs up smoke signals. Here inside, breakfast steams on, indomitably ordinary. After bowls are scraped cleaner than a monk's browser history, you're marched down a track that's mostly puddles wearing grass wigs. Destination: the local monastery, a name that here means 2 stone huts, 1 cross, and an unlimited supply of argumentative haircuts. Your escort includes Branwen, who's taken to humming battle lullabies, and the teenage bard whose voice keeps cracking like a defective pottery wheel. The mission: swap oat intelligence for blessing, and maybe borrow a monk who can read smoke signals if they come with footnotes. Commonly known fact: Early British monasteries sat at the junction of Roman literacy and Celtic farming, producing both psalms and crop rotations. Obscure tidbit: archaeologists have found combs made from cetacean bone at monastic sites. Apparently monks cared about dandruff as much as dogma. Scholarly debate: historians still argue whether monastic tangers were shaved across the crown Roman style or ear-to-ear Celtic style. The controversy is hair-splitting, literally. You arrive to find the brothers arguing over a single razor like it's the last charger cable on Earth. Brother Cyaron, freckles, tanger half-finished, claims the Roman stripe makes him look like a reverse skunk, while Brother Phelan prefers the Celtic headband of hair, claiming it keeps his ears warm during night offices. They turn to you, visitor from the future, as if you're an impartial stylist. You suggest a side parting. Both look horrified. Theological crisis averted when the abbot confiscates the razor and declares baldness a vanity of infinite variety. Inside the chapel hut, walls are whitewashed with chalky clay that flakes onto your shoulders like dandruff from heaven. A rough-hewn altar bears a wooden reliquary shaped like a tiny house. Inside, supposedly, lies dust from Saint someone whose name rhymes with Greg but isn't. You're asked to venerate it. Not wanting to offend, you lean in, whisper, "Hey, Greg," and back away before the dust can file a complaint. The abbot, Father Senac, has eyebrows longer than your residency permit, and a voice that sounds like gravel slowly accepting salvation. He listens to the smoke column news, then declares the need for field strip theology, portable faith, just enough blessing to fit in a saddlebag. He hands you a vial of oil, olive imported, smells like the Mediterranean crashed into Sunday school, and a scrap of parchment with Psalm 23 in half-legible Latin. Read if terrified, he advises, spray if pursued. You feel like you've been given a spiritual Swiss Army knife. Outside, the monk's vegetable patch doubles as a scriptorium, rows of kale, then a bench where a brother copies letters onto scrap vellum, ink part wedged into a turnip for stability. You watch him write Dominus with a quill that's clearly been gnawed by squirrels. He smiles, gestures for you to try. Your handwriting looks like a drunk spider ice skating. He tactfully suggests you stick to stirring porridge. Branwen, impatient, trades 3 oat cakes for a tiny silver cross on a leather thong, bling and belief in one transaction. She slips it over your neck before you can negotiate, claiming guards travel in pairs like wolves. The bard records the entire visit in his head, rhyming tanger with capture for later use, guaranteeing artistic liberties. Before you leave, Father Senac presses a folded page into your palm. It's a charcoal rubbing of a stone cross newly carved, interlace still sharp. Remember the pattern, he says, the same way trees remember storms. You nod, though you're unsure whether it's art, spell, or medieval QR code. Back on the path, the vial clinks against the borrowed shell necklace. Latin mingles with seaweed scent. You've acquired portable protection, questionable tanger advice, and a vegetable-supported scripture program. Theology, stripped for travel, turns out to weigh less than porridge but more than fear. Behind you, monks resume their haircut debate. Ahead, smoke signals wait to be interpreted by someone who now owns holy oil and a half-eaten turnip inkstand. You feel oddly equipped, like a video game character who just looted the tutorial abbey. Branwen adjusts her pace to yours, and the bard hums a new verse that includes the word skunk in Brythonic, linguistic fusion at its most unexpected. Clouds gather, not dramatic, just businesslike, You finger the cross, the parchment, the pattern in your mind, aware that faith here is less cathedral, more multi-tool, something to tighten loose courage or pry open tomorrow. Field ready, oat-fueled, and only slightly balding at the edges, you march on toward whatever the eastern smokes intend. The track forks at a stand of alder. One limb heads east along open downland. The other dives into forest like a secret Branwen can't resist. She chooses trees because open sky makes better graves, and the teenage bard skips after her, humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the monk's psalm played in a minor key on a juice harp. You follow, boots squishing out last night's rainwater, vial of holy oil knocking against your sternum like a tiny backup heart. Commonly known fact, early medieval woodlands covered roughly half of Britain, stuffed with boar, wolf, and trees older than most kingdoms. Obscure tidbit, pollen cores show a spike of lime tree blossom around 500 CE. Locals likely carpus lime for rope-grade bast fiber, dark age duct tape. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether place name, lay suffixes mean forest clearing or open pasture, because apparently trees and grass refuse to testify. Within 50 paces, the temperature drops 5 degrees. The canopy stitches daylight into a patchwork quilt that barely covers your nerves. Branwen sets a pace that keeps conversation breathless, so the forest speaks instead. Jay alarms, woodpecker morse, something heavy crashing away through hazel. Boar or imagination both have tusks after dark. You're midway across a fallen oak when the bard decides you need education. He points to a rowan tree scarred with shallow crosses, a patrapaic graffiti monk style. Rowan rhymes with protection, he whispers, misinforming you poetically. You touch the scars, feel sap sticky as guilt, and wonder if faith or boredom arrived first. Branwen suddenly crouches, finger to lips. Ahead, fresh tracks, booted 3 sets, heading same direction as you but heavier. Mail shirts leaving nail-head dents in mud. Saxons, locals, fashion-forward bandits. Unclear. She unhooks the small axe she wears like a necklace and signals, quiet, follow, assume nothing. Your pulse upgrades to drumroll. You finger the parchment psalm, consider a preemptive read, but decide Latin might sound like a squirrel sneezing and give you away. Instead, you breathe through your mouth, taste moss, mushrooms, and that metallic note forests serve when danger tops the menu. The trail dips into a hollow where yews form a natural nave. There you spot them, not warriors but monks, tongers unmistakable, arguing in hoarse whispers while guarding a handcart stacked with books. Yes, rectangular wooden tablets wrapped in oiled leather, the Netflix of literacy. One monk has a nosebleed, another clutches a half-eaten onion like a relic. They're fleeing, not raiding. Branwen lowers her axe, greets them with a phrase that translates roughly to peace, fellow escapees. Turns out their monastery farther east smelled smoke, panicked, and dispatched the scriptorium on wheels before anyone confirmed actual Saxons. False alarm, real fear. You offer the vial of oil. The nosebleed monk anoints his upper lip, snorts, then smiles. Blood and holiness now streaking his philtrum like war paint. The bard, delighted, swaps news for a song, receiving in return a parchment scrap, the alphabet in runes. Double protection, he declares. Guards love subtitles. You tuck it behind the psalm, creating a multilingual sandwich of divine spam. Together you escort the book cart out of the hollow, because even literature deserves a bodyguard. Branwen scouts ahead. You volunteer to push, wheels creaking like an abbot with arthritis. Every revolution spits mud onto the runes, baptizing knowledge in earth. At the far edge of the wood the canopy unzips, revealing open downland and beyond, a thread of smoke that is definitely not monks burning toast. Real this time. The monks think so. They abandon the cart, convert it into a tent by tilting it sideways, and start digging a slit trench with spoons. Turns out scripture isn't the only thing they copy. Survival tricks travel too. You leave them arranging parchment pages like shingles against rain, promising to send word if the world calms down. Branwen claps your shoulder. Approval, momentum, let's go. And you re-enter sunlight feeling larger, as if each book you pushed added a page to your own story. Behind, the forest swallows monk murmurs. Ahead, real smoke braids the sky. You check axe, psalm, runic scrap, and the new knowledge that books can bleed ink when frightened. Woodland shortcut complete, danger filtered, faith refiled, and you, still walking, still wondering what chapter waits over the ridge. You emerge from the trees like reluctant toothpaste, blinking against open sky, and nearly skate down a slope into the seasonal market, a huddle of stalls that looks as if someone sneezed wooden planks onto a swamp. Flags of washed-out blue and yellow sag above booths, their dye running in the drizzle, so that even the bunting seems embarrassed. Branwen calls it the traveling tongue, because gossip here travels faster than goods and costs nothing up front. Commonly known fact, early medieval markets operated on set day cycles, tied to moon phases. Today's a half moon, hence half price on certain fish and reputations. Obscure tidbit, soil samples from market sites show microscopic fragments of cumin and pepper, luxury spices leaking from torn bags long before medieval Europe supposedly imported them in bulk. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether markets needed royal licenses or just showed up like rogue Wi-Fi. No charter survives, only potholes. Your first steps dissolve ankle-deep into churned earth, the color and consistency of over-steeped tea. It sucks at your boots like a toddler who's missed nap time. The bard abandons you for a harpist busking near a walnut stall, swapping his runic scrap for an impromptu duet that sounds like two cats discussing theology. Branwen, meanwhile, hunts a comb. Apparently Lice negotiated extra territories during the woodland trek. You wander, pockets jingling the Roman coin plus 3 oat cakes you saved for currency. A vendor offers to trade genuine silver pins. His grin says the silver might have been born yesterday in a tin mine. You smile back, keep moving, because haggling here is a martial art, and you still have beginner limbs. At a tanner's booth you catch the scent of civilizational origin, urine, oak bark, and ambition. The tanner demonstrates a leather belt supple enough to lace Saxons to their promises. You touch it, imagine wearing a strap of liquid medieval linked in, but decline when he tries to measure your waist like he's sizing dinner. Next tent, pottery. Bowls wobble on a plank, glazed the color of storm clouds. The potter, a woman with forearms like tree forks, notices your monkish parchment peeking from your pouch and offers a bowl for your holy water, or mead, no judgment. You trade 1 oat cake for a small cup, because hydration is holiness in liquid form. A commotion flares near the pig pen, 2 farmers comparing boar scars, shirts lifted, audiences betting oat cakes on whose wound tells the better lie. You watch, anthropologically enthralled, until one farmer flexes too hard and topples backward into the pen. Pigs scatter, crowd applauds. Bard materializes to chronicle the event in spontaneous rhyme, payment collected in dropped walnuts. Branwen reappears waving a carved wooden comb triumphantly, then drags you toward a smoke-blackened booth where a smith hawks knife refurbishing. He eyes your little iron blade, clucks like a disappointed goose, and offers to reforge the edge in dragon breath for 2 oat cakes and the story of your sea crossing. You negotiate down to 1 oat cake plus a dramatic retelling involving the one-eyed gull. Everyone's a sucker for animal cameos. While the smith works, sparks bloom and die like fireflies with short-term memory issues. You realize your knife will be shorter, brighter, and spiritually dragon-certified. Market magic. Objects accumulate stories here the way your socks accumulate static. Finally, you reach the walnut stall where a thin man records transactions by tying knots in a cord. No writing required, just topology. You swap your Roman coin for a fistful of nuts plus market gossip. Eastern smoke columns were indeed Saxon warbands, but they swung north chasing cattle, not conquest. Relief tastes like walnut oil on your tongue. Bag lighter, pockets fuller of news than cash, you regroup with the bard. He's learned 3 new verses, a scandal about the king's buttermaker, and a rumor that someone is selling elephant ivory combs. Fake, but aspirational. Together you slog back toward Branwen, who now stands comparing boots with a Dane who claims his leather is seawater tanned. She rolls her eyes so hard you fear she'll sprain ancestry. Market lesson, value is a liquid that sloshes between bowls, belts, and boar stories. Everyone leaves spattered. Everyone leaves ahead. You pocket a walnut for later, feel the newly thinned knife snug at your hip, and decide commerce here is just survival with more witnesses. By dusk, the market packs up like a traveling whose animals have unionized. Creaking carts, cranky goats, last-minute swaps of onions for apologies. You, Branwen, and the bard trail back to the hall, boots double the weight from souvenir mud. The chief greets you with a grunt that could mean welcome, or you owe me oatmeal, then points to the central hearth where new logs already gossip with flames. Tonight is for poetry, he declares, because stories oil the joints before battle. You're not sure if that's metaphor or medieval WD-40, but you nod like a consultant. Commonly known fact, Dark Age elites validated history through praise poems. A good bard could immortalize your bravery or your bankruptcy in equal meter. Obscure tidbit, some halls hired mock bards whose job was to insult the king in exaggerated terms, ritualized roasting to test royal patience. Scholarly debate. Scholars still argue whether oral poets used set stanza chunks like Homeric formulae or improvised freestyle. The answer walked away in the 6th century and never wrote home. The bard, formally introduced as Talfrin half-cadence, tunes his harp with the solemnity of a surgeon counting ribs. Strings are gut, they smell like warm cat, but the notes ring clear once the fire quiets conversation. He starts safe, praise to the host, thanks for porridge, ode to the walnut that saved a soldier's life. You recognize your own barter, now upgraded to legend. Everyone claps in time, which here means irregularly and slightly offbeat. Then the chief demands something older than us, younger than stones. Talfrin's eyes glaze into memory mode. He launches the saga of a warrior who wrestled winter itself, chaining frost giants with his own breath, only to melt them into spring rivers. The hall listens, because winter is still denting their firewood budget. You feel the story settle over the room like a shared blanket, tugging imaginations toward the same warm shape. Mid-poem, Talfrin forgets a line. Silence drops, clanks, rolls under benches. Instead of panic, he turns to you, spotlight by firelight, and invites you to fill the gap with foreign spice. Heart drumming like a sparrow trapped in ceramics, you recall the monk's psalm, stand and recite, Dominus regit me. Latin rolls out, foreign yet grave, and the hall receives it like mead from an unexpected barrel. When you finish, Talfrin bows, repeats the last phrase as chorus, and the saga resumes, now braided with Hebrew pasture imagery. You sit to back slaps that hurt so warmly you forgive the earlier porridge burns. Next, the chief's wife requests a mark-barred insult. A skinny man with a face like a collapsed tent volunteers. He skewers the king's receding hairline, calling it arable land reserved for thought crops. The crowd gasps, laughs. The chief pretends outrage, throws a chicken bone, misses, and everyone cheers. The ritual complete, hierarchy reaffirmed through jest. You realize satire here is safety valve and social glue, a joke away from civil war. The night stretches, poems layering like sediment. You catch yourself drifting, eyelids practicing slow-motion curtain calls. Between performances, conversations shrink to murmurs. Someone's daughter eloped with a tanner. Someone's rye field developed suspicious circles, early crop circles, or drunken oxen. Verdict pending. The fire settles into ember mode, a constellation you can poke with sticks. Talfrin finishes with a lullaby about stars being campfire sparks from ancestral ghosts. Voices join the refrain, soft, off-key, communal. You feel the tune braid your breathing into larger lungs, the hall inhaling as one entity. Even the roof beams seem to loosen, exhaling decades of smoke stress. When the final string hums itself to sleep, the chief declares the evening sufficiently oiled. People stand, stretch, claim straw real estate. You offer Talfrin your last walnut as royalty. He pockets it, promises to immortalize your Latin cameo as the stranger who imported daylight. You blush, though visibility is low. Outside, wind combs the thatch. Inside, coals pulse like slow heartbeats arranging tomorrow. You lie back, words still ringing in your ribs, aware that poetry here is not entertainment but infrastructure, beams of sound holding the night up. As snoring begins its percussive ensemble, you drift on a raft of foreign syllables, warmed by a fire that remembers every voice it ever tasted. You wake to the smell of cloves and competitive drinking. It is, apparently, the eve of midwinter. No one tracks days the same way, but when the mead barrel rolls in, calendars synchronize. The hall is half lit by tallow lamps that gutter like gossip, and someone has looped ivy around the roof beams, turning splinters into festive hazards. Commonly known fact, Anglo-Saxon and Celtic midwinter feasts featured symbol, a ritual succession of toasts that could outlast the night itself. Obscure tidbit, residue in pottery from Lincolnshire shows traces of meadowsweet, a natural aspirin. Partygoers were literally self-medicating hangovers in advance. Scholarly debate. Experts still argue whether mead was always honey-based or sometimes just fermented oat goo. The yeast isn't talking. The chief clinks a bronze cup against the barrel and declares the first round to the sun. May it bother to return. Cups travel hand to hand like relay batons made of bad decisions. You receive one, honey gold and viscous enough to slow time. The taste is flowers set on fire, extinguished by water that once gossiped with bees. You sip, feel your tongue put on a wool sweater, and pass the cup along before etiquette accuses you of hogging bandwidth. Between toasts, food appears, joints of pork that could bench press a cabbage, loaves dark as winter soil, and a mysterious stew Branwen calls everything that didn't run fast enough. You eat until your stomach petitions for independent statehood. The bard Talfrin, now wearing a paper crown of birch bark, demands silence for a new composition, the mead of forgetfulness, a cautionary tale about a warrior who drank so deeply he forgot his own name and answered happily to anyone's, including the pigs. Laughter ricochets off the rafters, dislodging ivy and a small spider that parachutes into someone's ale. Round 3, or is it 4, targets ancestry. Each attendee must praise a grandparent while balancing on one foot. When your turn arrives, you toast the unknown Roman who dropped that coin now buying walnuts, which earns appreciative cheers because everyone loves a multi-century cameo. You wobble, survive, and sit before gravity files a complaint. By round 6, time develops a stutter. Faces blur into warm silhouettes. The fire becomes a painting someone keeps rearranging. You find yourself recounting 21st century life, metal birds, glowing rectangles, ice cream that arrives at the door. They nod, half believing, half deciding belief is optional after this much honey. The chief declares you a seer of sideways worlds and fills your cup again, because hallucination is just another form of hospitality. At some point, games erupt. Arm wrestling with rules that mutate mid-match, and a dice contest where the loser must compliment the winner's nostrils. You roll, lose, and praise the chief's royal nose tunnels, majestic enough for migrating swallows. This is recorded as epic wit. Someone gives you their bracelet of braided wool, now the equivalent of a drunken Nobel Prize. Between refills, Branwen leans close, breath sweet with cloves. Remember, she slurs only slightly, the night is a book. Drink until the pages stick together. Sage advice or convenient excuse, you file it under both. Much later or earlier, hard to tell, the hall finally quiets into a symphony of snores, crackling logs, and the soft thud of a cup rolling across planks. You lie sideways on the straw, watching beams spin though you know they're stationary. The room smells of burnt honey, pork fat, and communal confession. Your head rests on someone's cloak, ownership currently democratic, and the bracelet itches your wrist like a woolen reminder that you've talked your way into another family photo. Outside, midwinter night stretches, vast and ink-soaked, but inside the hall feels cocooned, a mead golden bubble suspended in the cold. As eyelids collapse, you realize memory itself is fermenting. Tomorrow you'll recall fragments, ivy, nostril flattery, a pig that may have sung harmony. But for now the night is a sealed cask, aging you into someone locals will swear they've always known. The last ember winks, satisfied. You follow it down. Morning after mead is a village-wide migraine wearing iron earrings. Heads emerge from the hall like snails testing for apocalypse. Someone's tunic is on backwards. Someone else cradles a cup of water as if it might file for separation. The chief, eyes pickled but voice steady, announces a raid drill, because nothing cures a hangover like hypothetical catastrophe. Commonly known fact, early medieval communities staged practice evacuations to hone response times against cattle raids. Obscure tidbit, archaeologists in Yorkshire found a 6th century cowbell inscribed with runes that translate roughly to run, girl, run, early bovine, early warning system. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether drills were genuine preparedness or performative bonding. The headache isn't talking. Your role, assigned before coffee, which won't exist for centuries, is chicken marshal. Duties grab poultry, stuff them into wicker baskets, and carry both to the hill fort upstream without losing birds, dignity, or breakfast. You accept because refusal equals latrine duty, and last night's mead has already visited the latrine enough. A horn blows, sounds like a goose being educated, and chaos blooms. Children sprint in directions that feel right. Dogs adopt freelance barking contracts. Warriors sling shields while still lacing trousers. You dive for the henhouse, a structure less house than philosophical suggestion. Hens, offended by your existential tremor, deploy flapping and commentary. Basket 1, 3 birds, 2 escapees. Basket 2, lid won't close because Henrietta refuses to tuck her drumsticks. You negotiate with prayer, walnut bribery, and finally a cloak thrown over the top, creating a poultry-themed poltergeist that pecks you through fabric. Branwen thunders past carrying a goat across her shoulders like a furry accordion. She yells, "Move! Pretend they're on fire!" You obey, sprinting, baskets banging shins, wishing for medieval knee pads. Behind you, smoke parts ignite, part of the simulation, spewing white clouds that smell of damp straw and dramatic license. The effect is cinema-quality panic. Halfway up the hill, you realize the true obstacle, gravity upgraded to Mud Edition. Each step slides backward half a pace. The hill becomes an escalator designed by someone who hates escalators. Chickens sense altitude and begin beatboxing. You consider ditching them. Remember last night's bracelet of honor and haul harder, thighs filing complaints with HR. At the summit, you collide with the teenage bard, who's documenting the drill in real-time rhyme, scribbling on a birch bark tablet while jogging in place. He asks for a quote. You pant, tell them the sky was falling and we taught it to fly. He nods solemnly, records. Heroic poultry whisperer reforms gravity. Public relations secured. Warriors perform mock defense. Shield wall tight as bad grammar. Spear points winking. The chief times the maneuver with a water clock. Basically a bucket with a hole, grumbling that real raiders won't wait for drainage. Elapsed time acceptable. Casualties, 1 twisted ankle, several bruised egos, and your forearm now tattooed with chicken claws. Temporary, hopefully. Descending, you pass the pretend dead volunteer whose job is to lie motionless while others practice not laughing. Dogs sniff him. One lifts a leg, decides against authenticity, and trots off. You salute the corpse actor. He winks, breaking character only when a beetle explores his ear. Back at the hall, the chief debriefs, baskets intact, extra mead ration. 2 escaped chickens, demerit, but since they returned for grain, forgiven. You receive a new title, Guardian of the Yoke, which grants first pick of next week's eggs and the obligation to shout "Beware the beak" during future drills. The village cheers, partly at your expense, partly because collective embarrassment is cheaper than therapy. Evening settles orange and apologetic. Muscles you never invoiced announce invoices payable now. You sit by the recovering fire, baskets stacked like war trophies, chickens already forgetting trauma. Branwen tosses you a strip of dried apple, post-exercise nutrition, medieval flavor. Not bad, stranger, she admits. You kept the sky from falling on poultry. High praise. Tomorrow may bring real smoke, real spears, but today the village rehearsed survival and only lost feathers. You flex your punctured forearm, discover a new appreciation for armlets, and let the fire rock the hall to sleep, while imaginary raiders retreat into mead-hazed legend. A week after the Chicken Olympics, scouts bring hotter news. Real raiders have burned a steading 20 ridges east, and the chief wants eyes on proof of their direction. You, Branwen, and Talfrin volunteer because curiosity beats hoeing rye. You leave at wolf grey dawn, cloaks waxed with bees' wax and paranoia, following a deer path that narrows until even the deer must have turned sideways. By midday, the land softens, grass giving way to sphagnum that sighs underfoot like a mattress remembering everyone it ever slept with. You've reached the edge of the great bog, an inland ocean that forgot to drain. Commonly known fact, Northwest European bogs preserved bodies in spooky detail thanks to tannins, acids, and low oxygen. Obscure tidbit, pollen from the stomach of Denmark's Gråball man shows he ate wild sorrel and burnt crust, last meal of someone in a hurry or without choice. Scholarly debate, historians still argue whether bog bodies were sacrificed criminals, revered volunteers, or unlucky travelers. The peat isn't picky. The scouts said the raiders skirted this mire. Tracks should be visible on the firmer eastern hummocks. Instead, you find something older, a fist of dark leather poking from the peat, too symmetrical for nature. Branwen kneels, prods, and the fist becomes a shoulder, a torso, a face squashed into a gentle scream. The man is naked, skin dyed the color of strong tea, hair a slick copper helmet. A rope of braided horsehair lies around his neck. It's not intricate enough for ceremonial purposes. Talfrin whispers, "He's telling us not to step further," voice cracking like damp kindling. You all step back, respectfully superstitious. The body's eyelids are closed, but the lips parted, as if mid-sentence with the bog. Branwen lays a small silver coin on his chest, payment for borrowed wisdom, while muttering a phrase half Latin, half lullaby. Wind across the moss answers with a low hum, reed pipes without musician. Your job is tracks, not archaeology, so you circle wide, marking each footprint in the soggy margins, boot nails, heel wear, distance between strides, Saxon spacing, longer than local legs. At least 15, maybe 20, carrying weight, toe digs deeper. Evidence enough that these raiders are real, moving southwest, probably aiming for the market crossroads you visited 2 weeks ago. You sketch the outlines with a stick, because memory likes company. Talfrin, unable to resist, composes a quatrain on the spot, calling the bog man ambassador from the country before. The peat seems to accept. Bubbles rise, burp sulfur that smells like disappointed eggs. You feel history lean closer, breathing through your own mouth. Branwen decides the body should stay hidden. Raiders might return, and desecration doubles bad luck. You help cover him with loose peat, tucking him back into his centuries-long dream. As you work, your knuckles brush against something hard, a tiny birch bark cylinder, waterlogged but intact. Inside, a single braided human hair and a flake of rust that might once be a spear tip, portable curse, keepsake, lunch receipt. Unclear. You slip it into your pouch alongside the monk's psalm, runic scrap, and walnut shell, your growing collection of protective ambiguity. Heading back, the bog keeps whispering. Every step squelches out tiny sighs, as if warning or inviting. You find yourself speaking aloud, promising to remember the man who loaned you fear and perspective. Branwen nods approval. Even pragmatists value receipts from the past. Sunset finds you on firm ground again, boots heavy with muck and significance. Behind, the bog exhales mist that stitches earth to sky. Ahead, the chief's hall waits for news you're now carrying. News of raiders, yes, but also of time's unpaid debts. You walk faster, aware that your shadow has gained another layer, not just stranger, porridge stirrer, chicken guardian, but witness to someone whose story ended where yours keeps stumbling forward. You reach the hall after moonrise, deliver the barg news, and collapse onto straw still fragrant with midwinter ivy. Sleep lasts about 4 heartbeats before Branwen shakes you awake again. Your left calf, unnoticed, has ballooned into a shiny grapefruit, probably a gift from bog water or an offended insect with diplomatic immunity. The chief's wife clucks, declares you useful but perishable, and dispatches you at dawn to the abbey's infirmary hut because warriors are replaceable, storytellers slightly less so. Commonly known fact, monastic infirmaries doubled as pharmacies, using herbs grown in cloister gardens that looked like salad bars for angels. Obscure tidbit, residues of meadowsweet, honey, and garlic found in a 6th century medical cup at Glastonbury. Early antibiotic latte. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether monastic medicine was charity or tithe-driven PR. The patients aren't complaining, mostly because they're dead. Brother Cyaran meets you at the gate, his tanja now fully grown into a respectable friar tuck halo. He smells of peppermint and ink, a combination that somehow inspires trust. You're installed on a bench padded with fleece that still contains active sheep personality. Sister Aelfled appears. Yes, women religious exist here, wearing homespun veils the color of undyed doubt. Her hands are stained green from tinctures. She calls you Pilgrim of the Peat and cuts off your trouser leg without asking its opinion. Diagnosis, moist humor gone bad, meaning infection, not failed comedy routine. Treatment, hot honey poultice, willow bark tea, and prayer light enough to float but sincere enough to anchor. The poultice is mixed in a scallop shell, leftover pilgrim souvenir, while she hums a chant that sounds suspiciously like lullaby pentatonic. You expect sting. Instead, you feel warm syrup seeping into skin, carrying cloves and something floral, lime blossom, she says, harvested from coppice trees you learned about in the woods. Even the infection seems confused, loosening its grip like a drunk who just realized it's closing time. While the poultice sets, Cyaran teaches you to illuminate letters, partly to distract, partly because ink is cheaper than poppy. You paint a capital P with interlaced otters. Your hands shake, but otters don't mind. Sister Aelfled praises the whiskers, then slathers more honey, turning your leg into dessert. She advises resting 3 days or until bees stop following you, whichever comes first. Visitors arrive, Branwen bearing walnuts, Talfrin with a new poem that rhymes abscess with sadness in surprisingly flattering terms. They stay long enough to drink barley water, then depart to check scout rotations. War waits for no ulcer. You feel oddly parented, the abbey a temporary womb smelling of wax and hope. Night falls. Infirmary candles are snuffed early to save beeswax. You lie listening to brothers coughing in the next cubicle, their illnesses harmonizing like an amateur choir. Your own fever climbs, plateaus, then breaks in sudden sweat that smells of honey and fear. Somewhere between shivers you dream of the bog man, his lips moving under peat, reciting your psalm in Latin accent so thick you need subtitles. He hands you the braided horsehair rope. You tie it into a bow, return it. He nods, sinks back. When you wake, the poultice is cool, infection drawn out like a confession. Sister Aelfled changes the dressing, approves the color, pink not scarlet, and allows you 2 steps tomorrow, 4 the day after, no river dancing until Sunday. You promise. She smiles, wiping green fingers on her apron, already scanning the ward for the next disaster. By the time you leave, you'll carry more than a scar, a recipe of honey, lime, and communal vigilance, plus the realization that healing here is a group project, God as foreman, bees as suppliers, monks as night shift workers. You thank them. Cyrane presses a tiny vial of meadowsweet tincture for the road or the next hangover, and Aelfled hands you a new strip of linen, freshly dyed yellow with weld, because even bandages deserve fashion. You step into daylight, limp lighter, legs smelling like confectionery sanctity, aware that survival now has a flavor, sweet, herbal, and borrowed from people who think time is best measured in layers of care. Your leg smells so deliciously medicinal that dogs propose marriage every mile, but by afternoon you've limped to the river ford where commerce and extortion share the same hollow log. A makeshift toll booth, basically a raft with attitude, blocks the crossing. Two brothers, identical down to the missing eye tooth, demand river tax in the name of a king whose name changes each time they pronounce it. Their accent could butter bread from 10 paces. Commonly known fact, early medieval tolls were often privatized by local strongmen who measured legitimacy in spears and plausible genealogy. Obscure tidbit. A wooden tally found near Winchester records eel payments for passage, slippery currency, literally. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether such river taxes enriched emerging kings or simply slowed trade until it gave up and went home. You have no coin left, Roman money long buried in walnut transactions. So you open negotiations with the only portable assets you own, humor and a limp. You offer to tell the brothers a joke that will make them forget their own aliases. Failure grants them your boots. Success buys free passage for you. Branwen waiting upstream, and the bard who's busy tuning his harp beside a suspiciously flat hedgehog. The taller brother, evidently CFO of the operation, squints, calculates the entertainment deficit in his life and bites. One joke, he says. If we laugh before the raft drifts a spear length, you win. He plants a spear as makeshift anchor. The current nudges the raft imperceptibly. Time will be measured in water and wood. You inhale, taste honey still seeping from bandage to skin, and begin. A Saxon, a monk, and a chicken walk into a mead hall. The Saxon says, "I'll have what starts the war." The monk says, "I'll have what ends it." The chicken says, "I'll have what's left." They all get porridge, because porridge is both cause and cure, and chickens can't read contracts. The brothers blink. A beat passes heavy as wet wool. Then the shorter one snorts, an involuntary nasal hiccup that rockets into full laughter. He slaps his brother, who also cracks, revealing that missing eye tooth is matched by a gold one glittering like a tiny sun. They laugh until the raft nudges past the spear mark. You win. Even the river seems to giggle against its banks. CFO brother wipes tears, declares you jester of uncertain provenance, and offers an add-on deal, cross-free, plus a smoked eel in exchange for a second joke to use on rival ferrymen downriver. You accept, because protein is portable and you've already proven comedy ages better than coin. Joke 2 involves a wolf, a comb, and improper tanja. Localized satire hits hard. They double over again, offering you a ride on the raft just to keep the vibe going. You signal Branwen and Talfrin. They emerge, trying not to look like hidden backup. The brothers eye Branwen's axe, decide Anna has already been sufficiently flexible, and pole the raft across. Mid-river, water oily smooth, you notice eels threading underneath like slim question marks. You hand over the second joke, receive your eel, still warm, smelling of beach smoke, and feel oddly proud, like a taxpayer who just invented deduction. On the far bank, the brothers gift you a token, a single eel vertebra drilled as a bead. Thread it, they say, and toll collectors downstream will know you paid laughter forward. You add the bead to your necklace of shell, rune scrap, and braided barg hair. Your currency is now mostly narrative. As you limp away, they shout a new king name after you. King Whatchamacalit the Witty, establishing precedent for future travelers. Branwen shakes her head, half impressed. You just turned air into passage, she mutters. Talfrin strums an impromptu ode, the ballad of the eel and the gag, rhyming fairy with merry, until even grammar begs for mercy. River lesson learned, liquidity isn't just water. It's whatever keeps moving, jokes, eels, reputations. You walk lighter, despite leg and new eel necklace swaying like a slimy pendulum marking time in punchlines, not hours. The eel, now supper, is nothing but bones and legend by nightfall, and you find yourself promoted to night shepherd, because wolves respect authority, but love an easy in tray. Your office, a hillside paddock, bounded by a dristone wall older than some countries, currently crumbling like over-baked cheddar. Your toolkit, a hazel crook, a horn lantern, tallow, smoky bug attractant, and a blanket that smells of both grandfather and goat. Your colleagues, 47 sheep who believe you are the least convincing two-leg they've ever met. Commonly known fact, early medieval flocks were small, prized, and often slept near settlements. Sending them uphill was a risk calculated against starving down in the valley. Obscure tidbit, analysis of sheep droppings from a 6th century Yorkshire hut floor shows residues of meadowsweet. Apparently shepherds used it as anti-inflammatory fodder. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether nightly shepherds stayed awake in shifts or dozed on mass trusting dogs. The dogs aren't snitching. Above, the sky is a salt shaker of stars. Below, the valley glimmers with a few stubborn hearth fires. Somewhere in between, you pace, leg wound singing whenever you pivot too fast. The meadow's sweet necklace. Yes, you're wearing it because why not? Gives off faint hay perfume that calms both you and the more anxious yous. Hours dilate. You practice crook tricks, twirls, leans, accidental self-tripping. Sheep watch with the blank politeness of in-laws. A breeze carries peat smoke and something metallic, probably your imagination, possibly Saxons sharpening picnic cutlery. You tighten your cloak, listen harder. Constellations rotate like a slow-loading web page. You recognize Orion only because Talfrin pointed it out last week. The hunter, but also the thief of dawn, depending who's rhyming. You try composing your own star story. The crook, the lantern, the 47 fleece, but poetry drifts off with the sparks. Instead you hum the monk's psalm, then the fairy joke, creating the first multilingual sheep lullaby. It works. Use chew slower, eyes half-mast. Around midnight, a shape coasts across the moon owl, silent as bureaucracy. Minutes later, you spot eyeshine at the wall corner, green, low, canine. Wolf, dog, shape shifts, disappears. You raise the lantern, light pools like weak tea, reveals nothing. Heartbeat upgrades to tambourine. You blow the small horn hanging at your belt. One long note, not panic, just alert. Down in the hall are answering horn echoes, but help is a 10-minute scramble uphill. The eyeshine returns, multiplied, 2, 3 pairs. You clang the crook against a stone, shout syllables that feel Nordic. Sheep bunch, a woolly hive mind with one exit strategy. You position yourself between flock and forest, aware you're essentially a scarecrow with social anxiety. Then, Bless the ferry brothers' bead. The wind shifts, carries your meadow sweet scent downward. The eyes blink, hesitate, vanish. Canines dislike perfume diplomacy, apparently. You keep shouting, mostly compliments now, nice fur, strong jawline. Until hoofbeats of human relief arrive, Branwen and two dogs large enough to pull small trees. They scout the wall, find tracks. Big dog, maybe young wolf, testing. Branwen claps your shoulder. You board them away with poetry and cologne. Well done. The dogs, disappointed no fight occurred, pee on every rock to reassert copyright. You spend the remaining night wide awake, lantern trimmed low, crook across knees like a shepherd king who's just discovered borders are mostly suggestions. Stars wheel toward dawn. You name one eel vertebra in honor of fiscal jokes that save lives. Sheep settle. Somewhere a ewe snores, nasal and content. Lesson: vigilance tastes of tallow and triumph, and even wolves respect a well-timed punchline, especially when delivered by someone who smells faintly of grandfather, goat, and victory. The horizon bruises purple just as you trade crook for spear, because scouts report those earlier dog tracks were reconnaissance for a dawn probe by actual humans. Sleep is aborted. Warriors move in that silent choreography perfected by people who have practiced panic. You jog downslope, leg wound humming but sealed, meadow sweet replaced by iron smell you can't tell from sweat or fear. Commonly known fact, Saxon raiding parties preferred first light. Households groggy, livestock easy to count before they scattered. Obscure tidbit, isotope studies on teeth from 6th century Kentish cemeteries show some Saxons grew up eating Cotswold limestone water, locals rebranded by fashion. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether early raids sought slaves, cattle, or prestige steel, motive left with the loot. You form up on the palisade's reverse side, a line of silhouettes pretending to be fence posts. Your heart drums triple time. The world narrows to breathing through your nose so the fog of it doesn't betray you. Branwen crouches left, axe balanced on shoulder like a casual executioner. Talfrin is somewhere behind with the horn, tasked with blowing only when the chief drops his raised arm. Medieval traffic light. The first sign is sound, a faint metallic kiss, sword against scabbard rim. Then shapes detach from half-light, maybe 15, shields painted with wolf mask motifs that look freshly drawn, war paint still wet in dew. They advance at farm trudge pace, confident the element of surprise belongs to them, unaware this farm invented paranoia. 50 paces. You feel every previous night's story coil in your calves, porridge, jokes, eel vertebra, psalm, ingredients of the person about to fight for continuation. 40 paces. The chief's arm stays vertical. Someone beside you quietly vomits breakfast oats into the mud. The smell is oddly reassuring, home shared. 30. You can see their breaths, small clouds that believe in victory. At 25, the chief drops his arm. Horn blares, high, desperate, strangely musical. You pop up along the wall, shout the first syllable that arrives. Latin, joking, profanity doesn't matter. Collective noise is what counts. Spears ready. The raiders pause, surprise flickering like bad signal, then charge, because retreat is for later. A spear arcs over the palisade, buries in a post near your cheek. Splinters replace adrenaline. You throw your own, wobbly but earnest, and feel the shaft leave like a pet you've trained for this one trick. It lands somewhere, maybe flesh, maybe shield. Result is invisible but satisfying. Branwen has already vaulted outside. no patience for defense, meeting a Saxon teen younger than Talfrin. Her axe hooks his shield rim, spins him. She knees his chest. He folds, alive but embarrassed. You remember Mark Bard jokes and almost apologize. Battle etiquette is confusing. Then the gate rattles. Two invaders wedge a log, ramming. You and a farmer named Dudaline against the inside beam. The impact travels through wood into your bones like a cello string. On the third hit, you respond by thrusting a spear through the gap. Feel resistance, hear yelp, music of repel. Minutes compress. Somewhere a warrior sings, actually sings, hacking rhythm with each note. You spot Talfrin on the roof, hurling stones the size of walnuts. He's rhyming insults. Wolf mask, milk cask, going home in flask. Marketing for morale. Suddenly the pressure eases. Horns sound different pitch. Enemy recall. Maybe they counted costs. Maybe their leader tripped on his own ambition. They drag wounded, limp backward, shields high. No pursuit. This village practices conservation of courage. Silence inflates, broken by panting, the crack of someone reloading adrenaline with no target. You look around, Dudda nods, bleeding from splintered knuckles. Branwen wipes her axe on grass, expression bored but eyes electric. The teen she downed is gone, footprints testimony. Your spear stands upright in the mud, feathered end trembling like a weather vane that can't decide which way peace lies. Sun breaches horizon, paints everything gold, shields vomit, spilled barley, all equal under sunrise. You breathe, realize you're still counting heartbeats like sheep you once guarded. 1, 2, 47 alive. The chief walks the line, clapping shoulders. When he reaches you, he says nothing, just meets your eyes, nods once. Payment larger than coin. Later you'll learn 2 raiders died, 3 limped off. Village losses 0, injuries minor. Legendary math. For now, you lean on the wall that held, feel honeyed leg throb in sync with pulse, and understand that survival here is communal punctuation. Last night a comma, this morning an exclamation, tomorrow still a sentence waiting to be written. 2 nights after the Saxon sunrise, the valley hums with after-battle tidying, shields stacked like unread books, a fresh split-rail gate pegged into place, and stories sprouting mushrooms of exaggeration. You're outside the hall, honing your shortened spear with a river stone, when a rider arrives, cloak lined with squirrel fur, hair the color of wet sand. He bears invitations, not threats. The regional king, think bigger fish. Still small pond requests warriors, bards, and anyone who can spell victory to attend a gathering at Caerleon. An old Roman ruin locals now call the stone tents. Rumor says kings will swap marriageable daughters, gold scraps, and maybe name someone leader of all islanders who hate Saxons. Ambient gossip labels this mystery general Amherorder, a title that collapses into Arthur when spoken quickly after Mead. Commonly known fact, the earliest Welsh reference to Arthur Y. Garderin, tilde 7th C, calls him a paragon, not a king, superhero template, not CEO. Obscure tidbit, excavations at Cadbury Hillfort show refortification around 500 CE with Mediterranean pottery shards. Someone important entertained fancy guests. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Arthur began as a real war leader, a mythic mashup, or collective wishful thinking with good PR. Your village elders debate attending, pride vs practicality vs walking distance. You stay quiet, but Talfrin volunteers you as porter, poet, and poultry expert, ensuring your spot. Branwen shrugs. Roads are safer in crowds. Decision made. 3 days later you march south in a ragged cohort, 20 warriors, 5 dogs, 1 cart loaded with tribute oats, and the bard composing couplets that compare kings to compost, necessary, smelly, capable of growth. Every night you camp in hill forts that feel like retirement homes for Roman ambition. Stones still carry chisel scars, but lichen now edits the inscriptions. En route, gossip fertilizes imagination. Arthur is said to ride a horse shod in silver, wield a blade that sings when Saxons approach, and keep a personal cook who can turn porridge into propaganda. You picture your own dented knife, feel no jealousy. Legends need polish you can't afford. At Caerleon, the ruins swarm like an open-air mall for alliances. Banners sprout from tumbled pillars, bear, boar, hawk, and one very confused duck. Turns out a dye leak, not heraldry. You're assigned to help unload oats near the makeshift stables, close enough to eavesdrop on debates about the next Dux Bellorum. Candidates include a grizzled cavalryman who claims lineage back to Magnus Maximus, charisma high, patience low. A queen in her 30s who leads from chariot, toddlers in tow, platform, fight now, dynasty later. A young warrior barely shaving, rumored to command crows, introduces himself as Arthur, accent thick, confidence thicker. He's not the only Arthur, 3 others milling about, names fashionable. But this one carries a battered shield painted with a crude virgin that looks more like surprised milkmaid. His eyes, though, lake clear, storm calm. When he laughs at his own coronet falling off, you decide either he's mad or history is rehearsing. During a lull, you wander the old amphitheater, now a negotiation pit. Stones echo with accents, Brythonic, Latin rough as gravel, Saxon mercenaries bargaining hazard pay. You feel Britain in committee, trying to stitch itself into something larger than villages, smaller than empire. Evening assembly, bards perform, gifts exchange hands like hot potatoes. Oats you carried become 40 sacks of golden rain, thanks to Talfrin's hyperbole. Arthur, version milkmaid, offers a sword pulled not from stone, but from an anvil another smithy brought as demonstration. Still, the symbolism lands, crowds murmur. You realize myth is just PR with better lighting. Nothing is decided. Kings need consensus like wolves need vegetarian options. But rumor solidifies, war-band coalition forming, spring target, Saxon beachheads along the Thames estuary. Volunteers welcome, songs guaranteed. On the ride home you replay the scene, embers of empire glowing under new names, legends assembled IKEA-style with missing bolts and extra mead. You touch the smoke, didn't see fire, yet feel warmed. Whether Arthur is one man or a committee of necessity, Britain wants a story big enough to fit inside. You're already part of it. Porter of oats, voice of psalm, chicken guardian, footnotes in a tale still being crowd-sourced. You return to find the valley muted under a quilt of illness. No fever's rage, no pus drama. Instead, a soft attrition, joints aching, throats sanding themselves raw, people moving like marionettes with slack strings. The monk's infirmary has overflowed into the hall. Straw tick mattresses now serve patients instead of gossip. Commonly known fact, early medieval plague often meant flu like epidemics or food-borne toxins. True bubonic plague cycles peaked earlier and later. Obscure tidbit, pollen from a 6th century burial in Cambridgeshire shows the victim ate mouldy rye ergot. Medieval LSD with fatal hangover. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether communities quarantined or communed harder. Surviving letters contradict. mostly because authors kept dying mid-sentence. Sister Aelfled greets you at the gate, eyes purpled by nights. She needs runners who have already tasted sickness and kept walking. Your honeyed leg scar brands you immune, or at least eligible. Assignment: fetch willow bark, deliver broth, burn clothes of the dead, and most importantly, keep spirits from sagging faster than lungs. The bard Talfrin has lost his voice. He communicates by heart morse, plucking emotions you must translate for the room. His latest tune requests stories that breathe. You sit by patience, recounting market jokes, fairy tales, even the Arthurian fog, anything to inflate chests with something other than phlegm. Laughter emerges wheezy but countable as pulse. Branwen handles the dead with battlefield dispatch, respectful, swift, unsentimental. Graves go beyond the usual boundary, far enough to appease cautious ghosts, close enough for visits. She asks you to carve name sticks. Fresh greenwood smells like hope trying to be permanent. Days blur into a rhythm of ladles, steam, and whispered psalms. The hall's hearth burns constant. Smoke claws your throat, but warmth is medicine too expensive to ration. You learn herbal improvisation when supplies dwindle. Substitute lime leaf for meadowsweet. Add nettle seed for iron. Sweeten with last summer's dried berries. Flavor matters. If it tastes like care, bardies believe. One dawn you wake slumped against a post, cheek printed with ladle marks, to find the chief staring at empty space. His youngest daughter, fever soft, asks for water in a voice like cracked ice. You fetch, hold her head, feel heat radiate as if her body is trying to cook despair. She sips, smiles, sleeps. You realize healing is sometimes just witnessing someone's battle and staying till the field clears. By week's end the curve bends, fewer new cases, more broth kept down. First request for extra blankets instead of final blessings. Talfrin croaks a single syllable. Sing. And you lead the room in the monk's psalm, off-key but collective. Voices braid, weak threads forming rope. When the last patient stands unaided, the hall exhales a breath so deep it rattles the thatch. You tally losses, 7 gone, many scarred, all changed. Yet the community feels tempered, like iron that survived fire and water. The chief clasps your forearm, says nothing. Words still hurt his throat, but gratitude transmits through bone. Outside, spring sneaks buds onto elder branches. Inside, mattresses are carried out for burning, smoke carrying away both pathogen and grief. You watch the pyre, feel heat kiss your face, and understand plague weeks are commas in the long sentence of settlement, pauses that repunctuate what matters. The pyre collapses into embers just as sunset lays a copper lid across the valley. With sickness ebbed, the living bend backs to reconstruction, thatch to relayer, tools to rehaft, confidence to reweave. The chief declares every hand a trowel, yours included, so you spend lengthening days hauling hazel rods, mixing daub, clay, straw, livestock consensus, and slapping it onto walls like frosting a cake that will never taste good. Commonly known fact, early medieval repairs happened communally between planting and harvest. Survival required speed over perfection. Obscure tidbit, daub patches often contained charred thatch fragments, medieval recycling centuries before the word. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether rebuilding rituals were practical or spiritual. The mud doesn't file affidavits. Your partner in grime is the teen you once floored during the Saxon skirmish. His name, you learn, is Senric, which he admits sounds Saxon because his gran hailed from the eastern fen. He's keen to prove loyalty, so he lifts twice his weight in wattles and asks endless questions about porridge consistency as morale booster. You trade oatcake recipes for lifting tips, forming a micro-alliance that smells of wet clay and generational amnesia. Between batches, you teach him Latin cuss words. He teaches you the Saxon equivalent, so when the wall dries, it will literally contain bilingual insults aimed at weather. Talfrin wanders by, jotting down the cross-cultural swears for a future poem titled The Wall That Spoke in Tongues. One afternoon, you unearth a foundation stone incised with a chi rho, leftover Roman, possibly a milestone. The community debates, keep it as lucky corner, or turn it inward to avoid attracting imperial ghosts. Elder votes for concealment, younger for display. Compromise, place it high, facing east, so sunrise strikes Christian symbol first, but spooks Saxon second. You help lever it into new footing, feel weight settle like history shrugging into fresh clothes. Evenings mean shorter tempers and longer shadows. The chief's wife measures grain stores, muttering calculations that rhyme with worry. You offer to trim thatch, climbing the roof beam like a nervous cat. Up there, breeze carries sound of hammering from neighboring steads, an entire landscape knocking itself back into shape. You realize rebuilding is audible, axes chunking, daubs splatting, children laughing because laughter is also scaffolding. Dusk becomes the day's true cathedral, timbers silhouetted against marbled sky, smoke threading upward like prayers written by fire. You sit on the ridge, legs dangling, eel vertebra bead tapping against chi rho stone. Below, people move between orange rectangles of doorway light, looking choreographed though no one leads. Senric climbs up, hands you a beaker of weak ale. You clink against the bead necklace, toasting walls that outlast us. He asks if you'll stay past harvest. You shrug, because calendars here are suggestions wrapped in weather. He nods, accepts ambiguity the way soil accepts seed. Night finally folds the sight into quiet. You descend, nails clay-packed, arms scratched, lungs full of wood smoke that feels like communal exhalation. The hall rises patched but proud, scars visible like medals no one polished. Inside, straw is fresher, hearthstones reblackened, rafters still smelling of green timber and determination. You collapse onto new stuffed mattress, generous chicken donations. Feel the building settle around you like a story learning its next line. Somewhere a beetle chews fresh thatch. Somewhere else a baby coughs the last of plague season phlegm. Both sounds are alive, proof the narrative continues. Tomorrow will bring more daub, more jokes, more rows of beans planted between palisade and past. For now, you listen to walls drying, to Senric outside whistling a tune half Saxon, half lullaby, and you understand rebuilding is just another word for memory deciding to stay. The first frost arrives the same night. A monk named Brother Sigebert shows up clutching an empty parchment scroll and a goose feather so sharp it could pick moral larks. He's been sent from the king's new scriptorium, Arthur's outfit, still deciding what color legitimacy should be, to record deeds of the valley for posterity and tax justification. Translation: someone upstairs wants receipts. Commonly known fact, early medieval annals often began as local chronicles later stitched into bigger narratives like the Anglo-Saxon chronicle. Obscure tidbit, ink made from oak galls and iron salts can eat through parchment over centuries, history digesting itself. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether scribes edited facts to flatter patrons or simply misheard through candle smoke. The truth smudges. Sigebert sets up on a trestle table near the hearth, a corner of firelight he calls the vineyard of letters. His workspace, a horn of ink, a knife for scraping errors or throats, you wonder, and a candle stub named Lucy, for reasons he refuses to explain. You're volunteered as guide interpreter because you speak future and can point out which disasters deserve top billing. First question, how to spell the village name. Nobody agrees. Branwen pronounces it one way, the chief another, the goat bleats its own version. Sigebert writes both, adds sick, Latin for I'm not the confused one here. You suggest abbreviating to our place by Muddy Ford. He shortens further to Valley's Luty in the margin, thereby inventing fake news and fancy branding in one stroke. Next he inventories assets. 47 sheep, counted twice, sheep object. 1 partly Roman wall, 3 Saxon teenagers now on probation, and a necklace of mystical provenance which he eyes while you finger eel vertebra, bog hair, runic scrap. You decline to explain. He notes relics, value negotiable. Evening becomes a live interview session. Locals queue to receive their 15 letters of fame. The chief claims the Saxon sunrise skirmish lasted all day. Talfrin insists his rhymes turn the tide. Senric wants his bilingual wall insults immortalized. Sigebert nods, writes, and occasionally mutters Deus, comma placement under his breath. Your own segment arrives after supper. You recount crossing the channel, porridge politics, fairy jokes, plague lullabies, Arthurian fog. He listens, quill hovering like a hummingbird that can't decide which flower is exaggeration. When you finish, he asks your name for the record. You give it. He frowns. Too foreign, too short. He Latinizes it, adds of the honeyed leg, and suddenly you're property of posterity with a medical footnote. He reads the draft aloud. The hall hears its life translated into rolling church-accented syllables, and silence falls so deep even the fire coughs politely. For the first time, your year smells of ink, a sharp, metallic promise that memory might outlive the mold on thatch. People nod, some cry without knowing why. Hearing yourself outside yourself is like meeting a twin who lived the same life, only taller. Sigebert offers to teach you letters. You accept, tracing alphabet shapes onto wax tablet while he guides your hand. A for altus, high ground you guarded, B for brassis, oat that sustained you. By midnight you've carved a shaky sentence. I was here and the porridge was endless. He praises the sentiment, copies it onto the real scroll. You feel immortal and exhausted, like a candle asked to be both flame and monument. Outside, frost feathers the window shut. Inside, Lucy the candle gutters lower, shortening by the syllable. Sigebert declares the chronicle sufficient for royal perusal, pending miracles. He rolls the parchment, ties it with the same horsehair rope that once throttled a bog man, recycling fate into bookmarks. You sleep beneath the table, cheek against oak still warm from ink friction, dreaming of words swimming like eels through future centuries, each carrying a bead of tonight's firelight. A fishing boat no bigger than a sneeze waits at the shingle, its skipper arguing with a gull over ownership of a mildewed biscuit. Your year is up, more or less. Calendars here are suggestions wrapped in weather and wishful thinking. The valley still sleeps, frost on thatch like sugar forgetting to melt. You shoulder a pack containing dried eel, a psalm, a runic alphabet, a silver cross, a walnut shell, and a scroll that calls you of the honeyed leg. Everything else, porridge bowls, chicken baskets, daub fingerprints, you leave to compost into memory. Commonly known fact, early medieval departures favored dawn tides to reach offshore winds before midday storms. Obscure tidbit, boat planks from Sussex dated tilde 500 CE show reuse of Roman ship timber. Nails still carrying Mediterranean snail shells, stowaways of empire. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether reverse migration, Britain to continent, was common for tradesfolk or just poetic exile. The waves file no manifests. Branwen walks you downslope, silence comfortable as old boots. At the beach she presents a new cloak, her own weave, indigo and walnut dyed, border patterned with tiny chickens and one ambiguous wolf. "For the cold where you're going," she says, though neither of you knows exactly where that is. You fasten it. The wool smells of smoke, time, and unspoken syllables. Talfrin offers a final poem, half whisper, half tide. "Go, stranger, with our past in your pocket. May your future remember us kindly. If the sea asks your name, say simply I was molded by mud and miracles." He presses the eel vertebra bead into your palm. Good luck, or at least good accounting. You try to respond. Words tangle, so you hug him, surprising everyone including yourself. Senric hands up a small pot of sealed honey. "For wounds or mead, your choice." The gull overhead provides commentary by stealing the biscuit outright. Settlement reached. You climb aboard. Planks flex, rope creaks, the skipper spits approval. The sail unfurls like a yawn dyed ochre and doubt. Onshore, figures shrink, Branwen's braid a dark karma against dawn, Talfrin's arm a metronome counting heartbeats you'll owe the past. The chief raises a hand, no wave, just vertical memory. You raise yours back, a mirror that will never again align this perfectly. Current pulls, oars knock rhythm, land retreats. Gulls wheel, screaming headlines about missing breakfast. You taste salt, feel Britain loosen its grip grain by grain. Yet the valley follows in sensory echoes, porridge steam on your tongue, psalm hum in your ears, chicken feathers on the breeze like lazy snow. Half a mile out, the skipper offers the tiller. You take it, wood warm from his palm, and steer a course that feels less invented than remembered. Behind, the coastline arranges itself into a scroll, white cliffs, dark forest, pale strip of fields, ink still wet. You imagine future eyes reading it, wondering who left, who stayed, what became of the man who stirred oats into diplomacy. The boat crests a swell, spray baptizes your face, mixing with tears you blame on wind. Ahead, horizon balances night and day on a blade of light. You whisper thanks, to monks, to wolves, to eels, to chickens, and release the tiller long enough to tie the necklace cord around your wrist. Shell, rune, bog hair, vertebra, cross, 5 beads, 5 senses, 500 years that haven't happened yet. Britain fades to a rumor of smoke. You face forward, toward whatever century waits beyond water, carrying a year of borrowed time in your bones. The cloak flaps, the scroll rustles, the honeypot knocks gently against your heart like a second, smaller heart learning to beat in 2 worlds. And so you sail on, mouth tasting of salt and time, into the grey dawn that looks the same in any epoch, an open parenthesis inviting the next sentence of you. The boat rocks gently, a cradle steered by indifferent tides. You loosen your grip on the tiller, cold seeps through your palms, reminding them they are still yours. Breathe in salt, pine tar, the faint sweetness of honey forever embedded beneath your nails. Breathe out. Let the last year roll off your shoulders like mist, each story a droplet finding its way back to the sea it borrowed. Behind you, Britain's cliffs fade into a charcoal stroke. Ahead, the horizon is only a suggestion, a paler grey whispered onto water. That is fine. Suggestions are enough for now. Your heart, recently so crowded with voices, Branwen's dry chuckle, Talfrin's harp string jokes, the chief's wordless nod, beats slower, measuring time in soft swells rather than chores. Feel the cloak's weight, wool holding dawn chill, but also hearth smoke, time from hillside walks, the pressure of a hand that wished you well. Let it settle across your collarbones like a sentence that has finally found its period. The necklace at your wrist clinks, 5 small witnesses. They do not demand testimony tonight. They only want to be counted, like stars that know your name but never press for favors. Listen. Water kisses the hull, a lullaby in stereo. Each hush is a reminder you were here, you were here, you were here, and now you are going, gently, permission granted. Let your thoughts drift, unballasted. If images come, porridge steam, a chicken's indignant eye, the bogman's quiet lips, watch them pass as you would clouds without assignment, without need to hold shape. Your breathing lengthens, borrowing rhythm from oars that rest. The skipper hums under his breath, a tune older than either of you, young enough to cradle anything. Let it cradle you. Feel the stern lift, the bow dip, a slow seesaw rocking every yesterday into tomorrow's pocket. Muscles unclench, start with the jaw, that habitual fist of words you might have said. Move to shoulders, dropping bundles of kindling you kept for fires not your own. Hands open, the tiller can steer itself a while, even the sea forgives drifting. Behind your eyelids, paint a color that has no name yet, something between sunrise and the moment a story decides it's finished. Rest in that hue. Let it spread outward, filling the hollows behind your ribs, the space between heartbeat and echo. There is nothing to pack, nothing to prove. The scroll is dry, the honey sealed, the cloak buttoned. All that remains is the soft percussion of breath and wave, counting each other into infinity. So float, pilgrim of borrowed time. Let the boat be your body, the water your breath, the horizon the edge of a dream you can visit again tomorrow. If you remember, no pressure. When you wake, the world will still be there, stitching itself together with or without your commentary. For now, let it spin without witness. You have earned the quiet. Breathe in, cool, salt, passable. Breathe out, warm, smoke, complete. And again, until the rhythm is all that remains, a gentle seesaw on which sleep steps softly, balancing between what was and what may be, tilting you, almost imperceptibly, into dreams scented with time and far-off hearth smoke. Sweet dreams.